Okay, let's start. Greetings, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the UNITAR, the University of Tokyo, Nagasaki Forum on Diversity, Disability, and Inclusion. The impact of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities and their inclusion in the global response in the context of the 2030 Agenda and achieving peace and security. This forum is co-organized by the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, the University of Tokyo, KOMEX, and UNITE, Kanazawa University, and Nagasaki University, in close collaboration with the Empower Project, Voices of Youth Japan, and the Simple Life Association. My name is Takashi Izutsu from the University of Tokyo. It is my great honor to serve as moderator today. This forum is going to be recorded and be available for public on our website and elsewhere. And simultaneous automatic English captioning is available today. If you would like to have English caption among live participants, please click the red live indicator, usually on the top left side of your Zoom screen, and click View Stream on Otter AI Live Transcript in the drop-down. Then you can access English captioning on a web page. Should there be any issues throughout the forum, please share your thoughts through chat function so that the Secretariat can try to address them. Without further ado, I would like to briefly share the objectives of this forum. This forum is organized as part of inauguration of the new forum on diversity, disability, and inclusion, which was kicked off by the UNITAR Roundtable on the effect of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities, which took place on 28th of May this year, 2020. 1 billion people live with disabilities, which is 15% of the world's population. And the international, national, and local communities have accumulated various expertise, good practices, and relevant normative frameworks, including the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, adopted by UN General Assembly in 2006, Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015, 2030 Agenda and SDGs, the Charter on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action, endorsed at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016, Interagency Standing Committee Guidelines on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action, published last year, and recently launched the Secretary General's Policy Brief, a disability inclusive response to COVID-19. The global crisis on COVID-19 has been deepening pre-existing inequalities, exposing the extent of exclusion, and highlighting the work on disability inclusion is imperative. Persons with disabilities are one of the most excluded groups in our society and are among the hardest hit in this crisis in terms of fatalities. But at the same time, the pandemic has been leading to an opportunity to build back our society better and more inclusive. In order to better respond to and recover from the pandemic and to realize truly inclusive society after that, this forum will review and analyze the situation of persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 crisis with global, national, and local leaders, experts, and practitioners from the member states, UN system, academia, non-governmental organizations, particularly organizations of persons with disabilities, private sector, and youth that are currently at the forefront of the disability inclusive COVID-19 response in Asia and the Pacific, as well as in the world. The forum will take stock of good practices and lessons learned from building resilience in the pandemic and other crises, building upon the social model of the convention and the principle of leaving no one behind from the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The objectives of this forum are to share the experiences in the ongoing work for the disability inclusion in the COVID-19 response, to curate good practices and identify gaps and innovations to address them, to develop a network of stakeholders in Asia and the Pacific for mutual support, information sharing, and collaborations for realizing the inclusive post-COVID-19 world. Now it is my great honor to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Luis Gallegos, the permanent representative of Ecuador to the United Nations, and the president of the United Nations Conference of State Parties of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Ambassador Gallegos is also the chair of UNITAR's Board of Trustees. Ambassador has been the leader in the area of the rights of persons with disabilities for decades. For example, his leadership as the chairperson of the UN Ad hoc Committee led to the development and adoption of the convention. It is our great honor to have you today, Ambassador Gallegos. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Izutsu, for your very kind introduction. Distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, all of you, my friends, it is a great honor for me as president of UNITAR Board to inaugurate the UNITAR, the University of Tokyo Nagasaki Forum on Diversity, Disability, and Inclusion. UNITAR, the University of Tokyo, KOMEX, Kanazawa University, and Nagasaki University, in collaboration with stakeholders from national, regional, and global levels, are organizing this forum on diversity, disability, and inclusion. In my current capacities as permanent representative of Ecuador to the United Nations, as well as president of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and as former chair of the Ad hoc Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, what is now called UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, almost 18 years ago. I am very pleased to bring to this forum the extraordinary achievements of the international community during the past decades and its continuous endeavors to make the goals of the convention a reality for all, the realization of human rights and development for a peaceful, prosperous world, to the inclusion of persons with disabilities, their rights and perspectives of the global agenda. We are very pleased in this forum is taking place, building on the excellent multi-stakeholder partnership addressing diversity and the inclusion of persons with disability, older persons, and those who tend to be further left behind, a key goal in the international community. The UN Secretary General's policy brief, A Disability Inclusive Response for COVID-19, was issued in early May to address this acute situation from the UN perspective. Under our leadership, 146 member states expressed their strong support to address the acute conditions of persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 impacted world. Pre-existing health and other essential services and exacerbated socioeconomic situations due to the adverse impacts have created inequalities, discrimination, and inaccessibility. Now we must continue to implement the recommendations of the UN Secretary General in alignment with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities so that we can build back better toward the achievement of sustainable development goals and Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and other global commitments. We must do so in our solidarity and collective efforts to promote the well-being of our society and its members, as well as peace and security in the world. This forum is indeed a significant step toward building back better. Just like what Japan and its local communities have been trending the path toward complete recovery from the great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami of 2011, and many inspiring successful have indeed built back better, and the international community is once again turning to your experience and expertise so that we can together work toward an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. I hope this forum, co-organized by UNITAR and the University of Tokyo Nagasaki Forum, key Japanese and international stakeholders, and I wish you the best of the discussions. Let me finish by saying that I am a firm believer that a person is born with a disability, and a person may acquire a disability during his life by accident, by sickness, by whatever other cause. But as we age, we will all have a disability. This is not about a minority. This is not about 1 billion people alone. There are another billion people who are aging. and there are the stakeholders of those people, their families, their husbands, their sons and daughters. We make a community of more than 4 billion people. The numbers are there, the respect should be there, and we have to work very diligently to make that the purpose of having a more diverse society and a most equal society. May I wish you the best in your discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gallegos, for your very inspiring remarks, especially in these late hours in New York. Thank you very much. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Kazuhiko Moji, Dean of School of Global Humanities and Social Sciences at Nagasaki University. Dean Moji is one of the leaders in the UNITAR, the University of Tokyo Nagasaki Forum on Diversity, Disability, and Inclusion. Dean Moji gives inauguration remarks on behalf of the forum members in Japan, including Nagasaki University, Kanazawa University, and the University of Tokyo. Dean Moji, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Takashi. His Excellency Ambassador Gallegos, Mr. Mejia, and the colleagues in UNITAR, distinguished panelists, and dear participants, it is our great honor and pleasure to co-convene the UNITAR University of Tokyo Nagasaki Forum on Diversity, Disability, and Inclusion. On behalf of Nagasaki University, the University of Tokyo, KOMEX, and the Kanazawa University, I would like to also thank United Nations Secretariat, UNITE, and the Simple Life Association for their strong support in this inauguration of the forum. Nagasaki has been a city of inclusion. Nagasaki was the only interface with the world in Edo period in Japan between 17th and 19th century. And Nagasaki has developed a unique and inclusive culture through communicating with and accepting diverse people and their cultures from various countries and regions. Nagasaki has also borne a culture of mutual understanding and peace through overcoming the impact of the last nuclear weapon used in war on Earth. We are currently facing rapid aging as well as immigration of young generation to big cities. So based on these experiences, we have always recognized the importance of an inclusive and accessible society which values differences and diversities. Since marginalization and the equality gap have been the root cause of terrorism, conflicts, violence, and refugees, and the threat to peace, respecting diversity and promoting inclusion through ensuring accessibility and participation is fundamental to realize world peace. We envision this new and prominent forum as a platform for global partnership, mutual learning, and innovation for future world in the area of such diversity, disability, aging, and inclusion agendas, which are fundamental priorities for the post-COVID-19 world. I'm very grateful that we can kickstart this timely initiative with these distinguished panelists and participants, and they're very looking forward to continuous and close collaboration through the forum to achieve truly inclusive and sustainable development, as well as lasting peace and security of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean, for your encouraging remarks. Now, I would like to move on to the first section, overview of and strengthening global normative frameworks. In this section, as introduction to today's discussion, 4 distinguished speakers will share state-of-the-art efforts on promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities in global and local communities. They also touch upon historic perspectives which teach us about valuable lessons. First, it is my honor to welcome Professor Atsuro Tsutsumi, Professor, College of Human and Social Sciences at Kanazawa University. Professor Tsutsumi has worked as a coordinator on Non-Communicable Diseases and Disability at the United Nations University International Institute for Global Health for many years, and contributed to the effort to integrate disability and mental health in SDGs and other global priorities. He also worked as mental health and psychosocial disability focal point in the World Health Organization Center for Health Development, as well as Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, as the first expert on mental health and psychosocial support, and coordinated inclusive psychosocial support programs after the Sichuan earthquake living in China. Professor Tsutsumi will provide overview and introduction of the international norms and standards relating to disability, including the recent Secretary General's policy brief. Professor Tsutsumi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Takashi, for your kind introduction, as well as your persistent leadership, the area of disability. It has been my privilege to have collaborated with you for a long time, including the time when you are leading various programs as the chief and the senior advisor on mental well-being and disability in the United Nations headquarters, as well as in the World Bank. I'd like to also thank UNITAR for convening this timely and one-of-a-kind forum. We are very excited, and I'm very much looking forward to working together with UNITAR and its partners on this global priority, diversity, disability, and inclusion. Today, I'd like to give some overview and introduction of the international norms and standards relating to disability-inclusive COVID-19 response. Since Professor Izutsu has provided great overview on concept of disability as well as its linkage with the 2030 Agenda and SDGs, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Humanitarian Charter in the May 28th Roundtable, I'd like to focus on UN mechanisms relevant to today's discussions, as well as the recent Secretary General's policy brief, a disability inclusive response to COVID-19. Next slide, please. In this world, 1 billion people, 15% of the world population, live with disabilities. An estimated 46% of older people aged 60 years and over are people with disabilities. 1 in every 5 women is likely to experience disability in her life, while 1 in every 10 children is a child with a disability. Of the 1 billion population of persons with disabilities, 80% live in developing countries. Next slide, please. To protect and promote their rights, one of the most important tools is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, adopted at the UN General Assembly in 2006. His Excellency Ambassador Gallegos has been the global champion who led the processes to develop the convention through leading the ad hoc committee, and it is my great honor to be in this forum together today. The convention states persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society. Conventions are legally binding among those countries that ratify them, and 181 state parties have ratified the convention. Next slide, please. General principles of the convention include respect for the inherent dignity, autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own decisions and independence of persons, non-discrimination, full and effective participation and inclusion in society, respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity, equality of opportunity, accessibility, equality between men and women, and respect for the evolving capacities of children with disabilities, and for the rights of the children with disabilities to preserve their identities. Next slide, please. In order to respond to the CRPD, the UN Chief Executive Board, CEB, decided to establish the Interagency Support Group, IASG, for the CRPD, and IASG was established in 2007. More than 30 UN departments, agencies, and funds and programs are the members, while UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, and the UN Office for High Commissioner on Human Rights, OHCHR, function as a co-secretariat. IASG, IASG has been instrumental in mobilizing consolidated UN voices in the area of disability rights. One of the outcomes of the partnership is the United Nations Disability Inclusive Strategy rolled out last year. The IASG is tasked with promoting compliance with the principles of the convention and increasing the skills and the effectiveness of the UN's involvement in disability issues. Next slide, please. In addition, as a concerted efforts of various UN stakeholders under the leadership of the Executive Office of the Secretary General, DESA, and the OHCHR, the Secretary General's policy brief, A Disability Inclusive Response to COVID-19, was released last month. This policy brief highlights the impact of the COVID-19 on persons with disabilities, and in doing so, outlines key actions. First of all, the policy brief overviews how COVID impacts persons with disabilities. According to the policy brief, persons with disabilities are at greater risk of contracting COVID-19, greater risk of developing more severe health conditions and dying from COVID-19, and persons with disabilities living in institutions are more likely to contract the virus and have higher rates of mortality. And persons with disabilities are at greater risk of discrimination in accessing healthcare and life-saving procedures during the COVID-19 outbreak. Persons with disabilities are particularly disadvantaged by the socio-economic consequences of the COVID-19 and the measures to control the pandemic. Next slide, please. The global crisis of the COVID-19 is deepening pre-existing inequalities, exposing the extent of exclusion and highlighting the work on disability inclusion is imperative. So the policy brief outlines overarching areas of action, which include mainstreaming of disability in all COVID-19 response and recovery, together with targeted actions to ensure systematic inclusion of persons with disabilities. Accessibility of information, facilities, services, and programs in the COVID-19 response and recovery, which is fundamental to the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the immediate health and socio-economic response to COVID-19. Meaningful consultation with and active participation of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in all stages of the COVID-19 response and recovery. Establishment of accountability mechanisms to ensure disability inclusion in the COVID-19 response. actions and recommendations to make the response and recovery inclusive of persons with disabilities through disability disaggregated data. Based on these principles, the policy brief also set sectorial actions and recommendations for a disability inclusive COVID-19 response and recovery. I hope this gives some foundation for today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tsutsumi, for your laying out the foundation for discussion today in a very comprehensive manner. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome Ms. Akiko Ito, co-chair of the Secretariat for the Interagency Support Group on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as the sub-working group on Women and Growth with Disabilities of the Interagency Network on Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women, United Nations. Ms. Ito has been the focal point for disability of the United Nations for a very long time. All the coordination which led to the convention, as well as various reports and resolutions related to disability, were possible thanks to Ms. Ito's extraordinary coordination, leadership, and network. Ms. Ito will talk about United Nations system-wide effort on the disability inclusive response to COVID-19, recovery, and building back better toward an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable world. It has been my privilege to have worked with you, Ms. Ito. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Izutsu, His Excellency Ambassador Gallegos, Professor Moji, and Professor Tsutsumi, and esteemed participants. It is my distinct pleasure to be part of this inaugural forum on diversity, disability, and inclusion, and to start our work together in this new chapter in the United Nations history. And this is toward creating an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable world by and for and with persons with disabilities. And I would like to thank once again this extraordinary opportunity to address a few messages from the United Nations Secretariat, especially from the standpoint of UN system-wide efforts that we have taken to address UN response, disability inclusive COVID-19 response and recovery and building back better today. And as you know, the UN has many decades of history in promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. For example, like the president of the board of UNITAR, the head of the president of the Conference States Parties, who His Excellency Ambassador Luis Gallego, who just spoke, was the distinguished chair of the General Assembly ad hoc committee on disability that drafted the convention in 2002 and 2006. And it was my great honor and privilege to be part of that, to serve as a secretariat for the both ad hoc committee and the Conference States Parties. And now we actually look at the world from this, the prism of the convention, as well as the global development agenda. So we are looking at the world when we talk about disability inclusion, when we talk about diversity. Of course, there's so many tools, there's so many different prisms that we can actually look at different aspects of the work that we need to do. But I would like to just focus just today on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and also what the UN system is doing in relation to addressing the current COVID-19 response, as well as our prospective action toward recovery and building back better. Just in relation to the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Convention actually generated a lot of political support, as well as again practical action within the context of the UN system. And as has been already introduced by Professor Tsutsumi, in the United Nations Interagency Support Group was established in 2007 by DESA, and also in the following year, it was joined by, it was re-established, it was actually confirmed by our United Nations entities meeting that OHCHR, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and then DESA will be co-chair / co-secretariat, as well as having one rotating chair for system-wide coordination and collaboration to address the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the implementation itself of the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities in a global agenda. And through this ISG, we started to address a number of issues such as global health in persons with disabilities, disaster risk reduction, and at the time of the establishment of ISG, the global agenda was still defined by Millennium Development Goals. So we actually started again, with CRPD, the strengths, political and legal force of CRPD was translated into mainstreaming of disability as a policy. Again, global cross-cutting global agenda in a cross-cutting global issue in the context of broader global agenda such as MDGs. And then we actually had working groups within ISG to address those issues. So that was, again, 2007, 2008, and it actually went further until the time that we established a multi-trust fund called the United Nations Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to generate UN country teams action on the ground. And we also, again, addressed the monitoring and evaluation through our interagency support group to establish benchmarks and to discuss how best we can actually include disability in the context of MDG monitoring and evaluation. And many of our discussions led to a number of expert group meetings. Many aspects of our activities also led to again, what you see as three pillars, as a disability inclusion in 3 pillars. For example, human rights, because we now have special rapporteur on the rights of persons with disabilities, and convention and universal human rights system, in its UN system and structure has been mainstreaming disability since the adoption and CRPD committee's establishment and its work, which followed 2008. And in development, of course, number of activities that I just mentioned in humanitarian action, disaster risk reduction, global health, community development. Now you see 2030 development agenda, as you know, as SDGs, now have included disability perspective and disability as an integral part of its implementation in monitoring and evaluation. And in peace and security, in 2019, the work that many of our ISG members, UN entities have done since the convention's adoption, for example, through United Nations Humanitarian Summit in 2016, and then also the work that preceded that, and then following that, the summit was culminated in 2019 Security Council resolution addressing the situation of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action. And in doing the process of mainstreaming of disability, United Nations Secretary General has convened executive committee meeting within the UN system to look at once again how UN system can bring their forces together and coordinate and operationalize the commitment to the CRPD, as well as to the disability inclusion in many development agenda outcomes of these conferences. And they had in 2019, in June 2019, based on the work that United Nations Interagency Support Group and its sub-working group, United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy was established and then launched by the launched by the Secretary General at the 12th session of the Conference of States Parties in June 2019. And this strategy is, again, in a bureaucratic language, we always say we are promoting cohesive system-wide policy and an accountability framework, promoting disability inclusion through a whole of system approach throughout the United Nations. The policy establishes the UN's vision for disability inclusion and reaffirms a common commitment at the highest levels. And it was deployed through, and it is going to be, again, bringing the normative framework and then operational frameworks of the United Nations to generate action by country teams on the ground. So you can see that there have been a number of, again, activities and institutional development that actually just changed the landscape of disability work of the United Nations. And this year, of course, now that we have the COVID-19 situation that we had to address, as has been already discussed by the moderator at the beginning of this seminar, our approach was to develop policy briefs in respective department agencies, and DESA also developed one policy brief on leaving no one behind from the disability and from the gender perspectives. And there are most agencies of the UN Interagency Support Groups, support group, also published policy briefs or declarations or any statements by their board of directors or by their the assembly, or there are many again resource documents that you can see in our website, which is UN Enable website, www.www.un.org/disabilities. And under this website, you find all of those most recent COVID-19 documents that have been established by, that have been published by these UN entities. And then most recently, as been already discussed, UN Secretary General has issued a policy brief that we are addressing today. And this actually absorbed all of those key elements from our policy briefs, and key members from our United Nations Interagency Support Group were requested to support the drafting process of this policy brief. And we are now in the process of, again, translating the recommendations into a package of different levels of action within different UN entities at this point. And we hope that, all of those, again, development that, that we have seen since the adoption of CRPD, and now, we are facing with this new situation in the COVID-19 impacted world, in order for us to steer ourselves back to the 2030 development agenda, and of course, in addition, building back better. So we want to do things better once that we overcome the current phase of COVID-19 impacted world, and then just again make use of our innovative approach to implementing the SDGs. Once again, building back better, and just like our, this is like our, it's becoming more and more our, again, sort of like catchphrase in this phase of the work of the United Nations. But I would like to just, at the last, finally, I'd like to just to talk about the ultimate goal of the convention is to transform society and development to be inclusive, accessible, and sustainable for all persons, which I think is going to be continue to guide us and continue to be, I think, our basic foundation for all activities that we will be engaged in. And I'd like to stop here and in our determination to promote our security and health and well-being of our planet and dignity of all of us, and let us continue to build on our partnerships. And thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the history of disability inclusion in the UN system and updating us about the most recent UN system-wide efforts on disability inclusive response to COVID-19 and beyond. The next distinguished speaker is Dr. Abul, Hasnat, Monjurul, Kabir, a Global Advisor on Gender Equality and Disability Inclusion, UN Women. Dr. Kabir has extremely rich experience in global framework development, as well as high-level technical cooperation on the ground, including as the UN lead legislative advisor to the Afghan National Assembly, through which he led process of the establishment of the Afghan Parliament and the lead in the democratic governance portfolio for UNDP Bangladesh and launched the first ever policy reforms initiative there. Excuse me. Dr. Kabir will talk about bringing the global commitments to the inclusion of women and girls with disabilities in the COVID-19 response, strengthening the linkages between the international UN frameworks on the rights of women and girls with disabilities and national, local level action. We are sincerely grateful that you kindly joined the forum. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful that UNITAR and the University of Tokyo Forum on Diversity, Disability and Inclusion invited me to join you all and share a few perspectives. I'm aware of the time and also some of the very relevant point already been shared. So I will basically go direct to some of the pragmatic issues that are being confronted by our field, our practitioners on the ground. Because as much as we talk about global normative agenda, on the UN Secretary General's policies, UN coordination bodies, all of these would not add value and would not be meaningful unless we really speak to the field and unless we really reflect the realities on the ground. Otherwise, there will be always a disconnect between what we do at the global level and what happens actually on the ground. And from the perspective of UN Women, and UN Women is, as Akiko mentioned, a number of processes. UN Women for last year was also chairing the board of the UN Partnership for the Rights of the Person with Disabilities, UNPRPD. And as a result, UN Women was deeply engaged with members, funds, and programs in terms of developing joint program in the area of COVID-19 response and other areas on the disability and inclusion. But when we are looking at the field, and we saw that some of the global normative standards that we have managed to create, we also realized that some of the challenges we are talking about today on COVID-19 are actually not a new challenge. If you look at some of the other previous disaster and humanitarian crisis and peace and security crisis, those challenges remain at that time as well. COVID-19 didn't bring additional layer of completely new challenges. It brought and reinforced the challenges that already existed and magnified. Of course, COVID-19 has a very specific health concern, but beyond that, some of the challenges and discrimination we are seeing today was actually pre-existing. So it didn't surprise us that a lot of exclusion that is happening now are actually happening and happening at a faster and greater scale, because some of the grand realities we confronted before, whether it was during the time of other flu or Ebola or humanitarian crisis, also remains the same. And we, as UN Women, we produced a number of country support policy briefs for our country offices, for our UN country teams. But we also were mindful that we don't want to impose anything from the top, from the headquarters. So together with our partners, we did a survey on what are the impact of COVID-19 on actually a number of intersectional groups. And I'm using deliberately intersectional because it's person with disabilities, not only with minorities, but also with indigenous people, also with LGBTIQ groups, and a number of other significant minorities with disabilities. And around 100 people with disabilities responded to those surveys, and they identified a number of challenges. The individuals mentioned that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on their ability to meet basic needs, achieve an adequate standard of living, which is again not new, particularly those persons who are living independently, including because of the issues related to employment and income, access to support services and assistive devices, access to public transportation, and access to assistance from friends, family, and the public. Now, we looked at different categories in that survey, and we realized that one of the greatest categories is the employment and income. And it's not surprising as well. As a result of COVID-19, the majority of the survey respondents shared that they had lost their jobs or had to take sick leave due to pandemic, had found the job market was not friendly to them obtaining other employment, and also having financial hardships as a result of the pandemic. Now, you might argue these are common to even person without disabilities. They're also facing the same challenges. But I think the magnitude is much higher for those with disabilities. We are looking at access to formal and informal support services is also shrinking out of that survey, and that happens in April and May. And we are also seeing a number of other fault lines in terms of our economic planning, our hospitalization program at the country level, and then the building back better, the terminology we're using everywhere now. We are seeing that many governments are actually not prioritizing persons with disabilities as a forefront. And that is a challenge, again, not new, but we have to keep pushing and raising the profile of the challenges. Now, some of the recommendation, if I may share with the panel members and with the participants today, is therefore responding to those gaps. So we are basically seeing that a lot of COVID-19 response that are happening on the ground. We want to make sure that they ensure a multidimensional lens and as they are developing country assessment to understand the discrimination and marginalization of as experienced by women, girls, and also trans persons with disabilities, so that the national policies are informed and national response are better prepared. We are also requesting, and we are seeing out of that survey and a number of our discussion with country teams, that the guidance provided to states recognizes the particular impact of COVID-19 on women, girls with disabilities. And our suggestion from the perspective of UN Women, a twin track approach is required. One is, of course, mainstreamed approach. Another is every single policy needs to tackle this separately, whether you are addressing a humanitarian challenge or a medical response plan or hospitalization plan or rehabilitation plan or economic recovery plan. You need to look into this practical targeted approach as well, in addition to mainstreaming of your overall national response. Now, we are also urging our colleagues on the ground that they need to ensure the leadership of women, girls, non-binary, trans, and gender non-conforming persons with disabilities through active consultation in planning for the implementing of the COVID-19 government and healthcare response and recovery plan. Then we are also urging them to undertake particular efforts to reach women, girls, because sometimes they are left alone and left outside the national planning process and also the consultative process. We are urging them to ensure the continuity of support services and provide adequate and accessible guidance to caregivers to ensure the safety of all those involved. We are also seeing the need to ensure the movement restriction and physical distancing orders factor in the role community support system play in facilitating access to basic needs, such as food and sanitation for people with disabilities, and also decrease the risk of violence for women, girls, non-binary, trans, and gender non-conforming persons. Because one of the other concerns as UN Women as an entity we have is the spike and the rise of violence, both within the parameter of the homes and also the institutionalization environment. And one of the greatest victims of this increased violence and the risk of violence is women, of course, and girls and women. And we are also seeing that the system like 911 or emergency call system is not necessarily accessible to those with disabilities. And even they have this access now, there's difficult for transportation. I'm talking about all the very, very pragmatic, real practical challenges that persons with disabilities, particularly women or girls, are facing, and how our international frameworks, guidance, and standards can really enable and strengthen government's hands so that the preparation for national response can be much more inclusive and informed of these processes. So therefore, UN Women as an entity, as part of the UN system, as my other colleagues spoke about, are in discussion and constant consultation so that when we are approaching government, we speak in one voice and we raise the profile of different sector-wide assessment and making sure that inclusion happens, not by default or by accident, but by as a systemic effort on the part of the government and private sector and other partners. But we are also urging government to allocate additional resources in this sector, because this is a sector also requires resource. And one of the tendencies we have seen in different financial crises, and we are going through another global financial crisis as well as pandemic, is social inclusion and social security is one of the earliest cut sector, where financial planner typically look for money and savings in the social inclusion and social protection sector. So we are also concerned that in the attempt for the government to build back better, some of the early budget cuts or adjustment might happen in the social sector, in the protection sector. And we are urging also governments and partners to make sure that those cuts are consistent with cuts in the overall economic readjustment process, so that this does not sort of seen as only an opportunity to save money. So that would be my plea to all of you, because all of you had an important role in our respective societies and institutions where we are representing. And I would say that we'll continue to collaborate and cooperate with as part of the UN system, but also beyond UN system, because as UN Women, we have deeper relationship with women's movement in countries. And we'd like to make sure that women's movements are connecting with disability movement, and the both movements are syncing together so that they can benefit each other and reinforce each other as well, in addition to some of the UN partners and non-traditional partners that we are talking about. I'm very pleased that we are here today and would be looking forward to, with you, follow up to this forum. Is there anything practical or joint knowledge product or something that would be helpful for country offices and our field operators, particularly those colleagues who are working in a humanitarian context or in a fragile state setting or in a post-conflict crisis countries with minimum support? We would be able to support them better out of this knowledge that would be generated in this forum and beyond. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing this engagement.
Thank you very much for sharing very concrete examples of the UN activities on disability inclusive development and beyond at the national and local levels by UN Women, UN country teams, and partners, with highlighting the perspectives of women and girls with disabilities and other key stakeholders, including indigenous people, LGBTI persons, and other marginalized populations. Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome Dr. Chie Shijo, visiting researcher at the Graduate School of Global Humanities and Social Sciences, Nagasaki University. Dr. Shijo has a very unique expertise of history and sociology. Based on her research on how histories are documented and communicated to later generations, with a special focus on voices of persons with disabilities. Dr. Shijo will share her perspectives on what we need to do now in our inclusive COVID-19 response for our future. Dr. Shijo will talk about including persons with disabilities in recourse of and lessons learned from emergencies, experiences from Nagasaki toward the inclusive post-COVID-19 world. Dr. Shijo, it is my privilege to welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Izutsu, for your kind introduction. I live in Nagasaki City, which is one of the 2 Japanese cities to have atomic bomb in World War II. My current research attempts to uncover the ways in which deaf survivors of Nagasaki bombing have narrated the damages caused by the bombing. One of the problems faced by the deaf persons in the global crisis of COVID-19 is the lack of accessibility to information. The first case of COVID-19 in the Nagasaki prefecture was reported on March 19, 2020. Following this, the number of press conferences held by the governor increased. Initially, there were no sign language interpreters in the press conferences, thus, the information available to the deaf persons was insufficient. After the deaf groups made repeated requests to the prefecture, a sign language interpreter joined in the press conferences a month later. The atomic bombing of Nagasaki around 75 years ago claimed the lives of about 70,000 people. While the damage among the deaf persons is not well known, it is believed that about 30 out of 100 people in Nagasaki died immediately after the bombing. The album experiences have been written since under the spectrum of foreign occupation. In the late 1960s, a movement to proclaim album experiences started, and many books have come to be published in this regard. However, the first accounts of deaf survivors in Nagasaki were published in the mid-1980s, 40 years after the bombing. There was a significant gap in the timing of these publications. If you have read the deaf person's album testimony, you will know that there are some differences in the deaf person's testimony in comparison to that of hearing person. One of the differences is the range of time spoken. Hearing persons often narrate their experiences starting from the time they were exposed to the detonation. Such as a brilliant flash of light struck my eyes. Then there was a deep rumbling sound. In contrast, deaf persons often narrate their experiences from the time they become deaf. Although this might be the result of interviewers' interests. The other difference is that deaf persons can access only a few pieces of information concerning the damages caused by detonation. Some persons could not attend deaf school as well as speak the sign language. Even among people who could speak the sign language, it was not easy to hear their experiences. There were persons who could not understand the words and concepts of atomic bomb, mushroom cloud, and radioactivity. even in the mid-1980s. The opportunities available were not enough to obtain information concerning the damages caused by the atomic bomb for about 40 years. If we take a look at all persons with disabilities, including persons with intellectual disabilities and blind persons, we find only deaf persons to have published their ABAM experiences. I searched for the testimonies of ABAM survivors with intellectual disabilities. None of them found until now. In the process concerning the reconstruction of the destroyed city, the obstacles posed by the atomic bombing have been discussed as damages caused by the atomic bomb itself. However, few people have reflected on the damages borne social barriers to persons with disabilities before the bombing, and the steps they have taken since then. There are other persons with disabilities who still remain unspoken in history. As mentioned earlier, deaf persons face the issue of lack of information accessibility. With respect to the damages caused by the ABAM and succeeding experiences, there was no consideration of information accessibility to persons with disabilities. Although atomic bombs are said to be indiscriminate weapons, however, in the process of rescue and recovery, social problems did emerge in the long run. One of the problems faced by persons with disabilities is that of their names missing in the ABAM history. In the same way, the problems we face in the crisis of COVID-19 are what we have in our daily life. This crisis will be narrated as a historical event in the future. I think it is important to also narrate the experiences of persons with disability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting and important perspective. I think we tend to focus on what is going on now in front of us, but with Dr. Shijo's presentation, I think we are re-recognizing importance of bigger picture and longer time frame, including our history and our future. Thank you very much. Now, let's move on to the second section on ongoing work on disability inclusive COVID-19 response and recovery. First, we will learn from country and regional experiences. As a first speaker, it is my great honor to welcome Ms. Natsuki Soda, STEP Edogawa, and Special Board Member of the Disabled People's International DPI Japan. Ms. Soda has very rich experience in global cooperation through her research on marginalization of persons with disabilities in post-conflict Rwanda and her work as a JICA staff member in many countries and regions, including in the Philippines. Ms. Soda has been playing leadership roles in the Disability Equality Training Forum, Disabled People's International Japan, as well as in her local community. Thank you very much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Natsuki Soda. I'm a special board member of DPI Japan. Today, I'm not going to talk about what kind of requests have been made by an organization of persons with disability in Japan to make the COVID-19 response more disability inclusive. One of the reasons is that I think these kinds of messages have been already heard and also shared at international conferences. And the other reason is, this is the main reason, I wasn't actually involved in the advocacy at the national level. So I have been actually involved in trying to not to stop our regular services at local level for our fellow persons with disabilities. So I'd like to talk about some of my experiences today. While working as a board of DPI Japan, I am also working at the Center for Independent Living in Tokyo, and where I do my day-to-day work with each individual. We often have a visit and calls from persons with disabilities who need someone to talk to. And at the end of March, when we started to limit the number of persons at the office to 2 persons at maximum, some staff started to complain about calls. Some frankly said, I just don't feel like taking these calls now. I'm here in the office to do some other things. And others said, maybe we should stop our consultation services for now because we have to deal with emergencies now. I wanted to figure out a way to find out how to continue to take their calls. In case for what we call emergencies, whether it's COVID-19 or natural disasters, disregarding the needs of those considered not our priority could be a very easy thing for us to do. It would be inconsistent if we criticize the triage at the hospitals, but just ignore the needs of someone in our community, judging it is not worth taking our time. We should think about creating new resources, rather think about how to best use our limited resources, time, manpower, or whatsoever. As for the triage at the hospitals, some people will say, do not even think about for whom we should use ventilators. Other, we should think about how to supply more ventilators to hospitals so that we do not have to judge whose lives are worth living and whose lives are not. If we try to hold on to the idea that our resources are limited, we will naturally start prioritize things. Especially at the time of emergency, we tend to think that our resources more limited than usual. For example, our ventilators are not enough now, so we can't help but to let this old man die. Or we do not have enough manpower now, so we can't help but to ignore the call from the lady with schizophrenia, for example. This is sad. We can definitely make better choices, I think. And I think it starts from standing firmly on the same message that we do care each and everyone. So to return to the story of our center, we decided to just transfer these calls to the staff who work from home. Then each of us will take time and able to listen as usual as possible. One of the consumers told me that they could easily tell whether we have willingness to stay with them during the emergencies or we are trying to abandon them, taking this emergency as an excuse. And I knew they could tell that. If I look back the situation of our center before the pandemic, I realized that emergency was not the only excuse to dismiss the needs of someone. There were times we did not take call from the same person saying that we are too busy now. We did not hire sign language interpreters saying that this is due to the lack of budget. We did not dispatch personal assistants to someone saying that we do not have enough people now, without taking any effort to recruit new personal assistants. So to build back better, we needed to look not only at what is happening during the pandemic, but also to reflect upon what we were really missing before the pandemic. Whatever the world looks like, we will always have to deliver the same message, which is there is nothing like lives not worth living. And I believe that young people like us working at the forefront can symbolize and amplify that message, sincerely continuing our daily work for people who come to us for some reasons. And I think that is a tangible difference that we can make now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of not to stop existing services at the local level based on your concrete practices in Edogawa, Tokyo. Many non-emergency response activities are indeed priorities and foundation for our lives, even in crisis situation. And as Ms. Soda indicated, a touch of creativity, persistence, flexibility, and collaboration can come up with solution. Thank you for the inspiring intervention. Our next speaker is Ms. Abia Akim from Pakistan. Ms. Akim is the global chair of the UNICEF Global Youth Council and also the coordinator of the South Asia Disability and Development Initiative project. Ms. Akim has been a young leader in various activities of disability movement. This includes contribution to establishment of the National Forum of Women with Disabilities and Aging and Disability Task Force at the national level. And she has also led activities of various global and regional networks on disability inclusion. Thank you very much for joining us from very early in the morning in Pakistan today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful for UNITAR, for all the key stakeholders, UNJSA, and especially the University of Tokyo for launching of this important forum on inclusion, disability, and engagement, because we feel like this is really important and the critical time when we see the impact of the COVID-19 on the persons with disabilities in line with the 2030 agenda. In the context, we are talking from the Asia-Pacific region, because we have just recently had the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, and the outcomes and the discussions came up from the conversations from the perspective of the civil society organization. They came up with the very strong recommendations, because the women and girls with disability all over the Asia Pacific, globally, they are facing so many discrimination, and they are not like on the leadership role. So how we can see and use this platform to for some of the strong recommendations where we can bring more voices of persons with disabilities. Can you go to the next slide? We have like witnessed that we are not on the track in achieving the Agenda 2030, because the current COVID-19 situation have further exposed that states have failed to protect the people's right and to deliver people's need. It's not only about persons with disabilities, it's all over the world. Like, people are facing inequalities in healthcare, in universal social protections. And the shortfalls are contextualized in the current crisis being lived by persons with disability, because we have seen like all the public health crisis during the COVID-19. Persons with disabilities needs are not like addressed in this situation. We have severe wealth inequalities, like persons with disabilities from the global south, they are from the marginalized communities, they are facing all the like economical bad relation, because they don't have proper income support programs, and there is severe inequalities in the wealth. And then environmental and the climate crisis, because the infrastructures are not built in a way where we can see the persons with disabilities can contribute in the development. The climate change is also affecting the lives of persons with disabilities, the recent pandemic, and also the rains, earthquakes, and all the floods and all that situation. Persons with disabilities are the first one who get all the vulnerabilities and all the discrimination in these situations. Next slide. we have seen like 10 to 15% of, as mentioned earlier, of the total population are persons with disability. 50% of them are women and girls with disability, and 80% of them are living in the rural areas, which is a huge number. And they are not visible at all. When we go to the field, when we go to the communities, they are just confined in the homes. We have been working for last like 20 years, and we are seeing like persons with disabilities are living just as prisoners at home. And in this situation of the COVID response, when we have the lockdown and people with disabilities are at the greater risk, because of the close contact with the personal assistance services, all the lockdown provisions have made their lives more complicated, because now the severely disabled persons are not having access to get the personal assistance services. Even to go to the toilet, to have the food, to drink water, they have to ask their family members, and they feel more burdened, and they feel like it's very difficult for them to take all the responsibility immediately, like after the lockdown. Now the personal assistance services are not available. So in that situation, they stop drinking the water, they stop taking food, because they thought like if we ask to the family members, they will feel bad and they will feel burdened. And in that situation, they stop like all that day-to-day activities and got more health bad conditions. And there is no services where they can go and talk to the people, to the doctors, or consult with them. For example, the deaf people, they can't communicate on the like virtually, so they need the sign language interpreters. If there is a blind woman, they can't communicate with the people. So these are the challenges, and then the risk of increased stigma on the basis of disability. As I mentioned earlier, like in some of the talks, I met with few women with disabilities and their parents during this situation, and they were praying like our daughter die before we die, because nobody is going to take care of them. So in that situation, how you are going to engage women with disabilities in the leadership roles, in the development perspective, and we expect from them to work on the sustainable development, like how they can work towards the progress of the country, because they are dying. And then the increased food insecurity, loss of support mechanism, and protection like concerns, because physical disabled persons or all kind of intellectual disabled, they are facing the discrimination in that existing mechanism. There is no communication gap, physical infrastructure gap, communication gap, and then the access to information. They are not getting all the COVID-19 response information in an accessible format. So they are unaware to communicate to the other people. They are unaware to communicate and how to the family members and all. Next slide. Then we have like, we just discussed through the virtual discussions with surveys, with lot of like conversation with other people, like how we can make our position, what are the practical strategies, so we can see what are the entry points on the sustainable development goals, where we can see like person with disabilities can play and like fight with this current situation. We have like ending poverty. A significant number of world's extreme are living in the South Asia, which I already mentioned, and persons with disabilities are the most marginalized. The government need to ensure the full realizations of women's human rights. Obviously, when we see women and girls with disabilities, they are facing double discrimination. They are facing the gender-based violence, sexual health and reproductive rights concerns. They are facing harassment within the homes. And in that situation, the government have to make their strategies which are inclusive and addressing the human rights, because disability rights are human rights. And how the gender legislation and the policies that contribute to gender inequality, how we can make those voices of women with disabilities heard in the government structure, in the position of the government. And government need to ensure clear financial strategies. I'm talking about the developing countries where the financial structure is also not strong. So how we can provide the basic needs to persons with disabilities according to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the insurance strategy, which is for the decade of the person with disability in Asia Pacific. So we have all these legal binding documents, the information is there, but it's just about allocating the equal budgeting, how the strategies and the financial resources needed are targeting the sustainable development goals and well-being of the capabilities are in place. So these are the important factors where we can see the entry point, and then concerns of the shrinking space of the engagement of the disabled people organizations. And on the regional level, on the global level, when we talk about the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, when we talk about the high-level political forum, we need more engagement of the civil society organization, and particularly disabled people organization, because in this situation, they are facing the barriers and discrimination. So we need to create the space so they can talk about their challenges, their problems from the grassroots to the national and the regional level. Finally, ensuring the availability of reliable data, because we are finding it so hard to identify where these persons with disabilities are existing. Even in the Asia Pacific region, we have talked with women with disabilities, and they said we are not counted at all. So how we can get the specific numbers to present it to the policy makers, to the service provider organizations, so they can make an analysis and work plan according to the needs of this specific number. So this is really important to get the data and the segregated data on women, on girls, on older people, and how many of living in the rural areas and the global settings. So that's really important. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'll talk about the GBV and this, including sexual exploitation of women and girls with disability, because these women with disabilities, when we try to identify the barriers they are facing, we find out in the disability movement and in the gender movement, both they are excluded, and which is very unfortunate because we can't see their leadership roles, any conventions or the policies on the national level who are addressing the needs of women and girls with disability. So the UN is taking the lead. I know Akiko Ito-san has been contributing a lot to support the Asia Pacific women with disability, but still there's a lot to work on the national levels, on the policy level, and then how we can work together to see, do the research work on the sexual and reproductive rights of women with disability and the challenges they are facing, additional challenges during the COVID response. So if there's any data bank where we can do the country level and some of the regional level research on the rights of women with disability, that would be really helpful to address further the challenges. Next. When we talk about the sustainable and the just economies, we also talk about the global pandemic further exposes the unsustainability and injustice economy at the mercy of the profit-making corporations. So there is a direct need for women with disabilities or DPOs, disabled people organizations, to take the lead and get, make the direct support from the international organizations, so at least they can contribute at the grassroots level. We need structural changes for the sustainable development and promote international cooperation and solidarity that lead to urgent measures to protect people's rights. In the long term, the world must never return to the business as usual, because now the strategies will be different. But we need structural changes where we can identify each of the segment of the society on the equal level and provide them the opportunities to talk and work. Law, policies, and other initiatives need to be taken for the sustainable employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. Because they are confined at homes and they can't do much. So how we can provide them opportunities to learn how to use the the technology, how to do different virtual forums to work together, and then granting meaningful CSO participation in the decision making. That's the key where we can see the role of persons with disabilities organizations. Next, please. And we can see like this is the last decade of action, like 10 years left for the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. So this is only happen if the government have the pressure into acting quickly and this is towards the transformation. Now we have the global policies, we have the legislations on the global level, on the regional level, but how the national state representatives are taking the lead towards the transformation. It will only happen if the systematical barriers are addressed, like data segregation, information, making their policies more inclusive for persons with disability, translating in easy language and sign language, braille, all these material that need to be disseminated among persons with disabilities, engage in and civil society people, feminist movements, grassroots communities, including among those are the volunteers are the two means of implementation of the 2030 agenda, like how the academic organizations, the universities are taking the lead. They can transform in the practical language. They can work on the research work of the person with disabilities. They can translate that all the international legal binding documents in the easy to understand language and engaging persons with disabilities in that. The people of the Asia Pacific have the answers how to facilitate transfer because they have been experiencing from that like rest of their lives that every day they face the discrimination, they face the challenges in the life, and they bring the opportunities for persons with disabilities. So how we are engaging them, talking to them and asking what are their needs, because I feel like persons with disabilities are the best advocates of their rights. So they need to be included at all levels on the global, regional and the grassroots level. And then all over the region, communities are coming up with the solutions, for example, creating task force on the country level, on the regional level. So if we use this forum as a platform where we can develop some toolkits for the organizations who want to contribute in the disability sector. So these toolkits will be very helpful for UN, for international organizations, for the grassroots, or even for the government officials, how to like use these inclusion of persons with disabilities perspective in that. We can develop peer support groups through this platform, the small where we can engage women with disabilities who are experts. So those women with disabilities can talk about their rights and they can further explain and engage more women with disabilities in this trauma and the psychosocial problems. And thirdly, we can also do some research work on the practical strategies, how we can engage persons with disabilities. But this is really a platform where we can like continuously work towards the inclusion of persons with disability. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting the intersection with multidisciplinary SDGs, as well as importance of gender perspectives, including sexual reproductive health and reproductive rights, namely rights of women and girls with disabilities. In addition, thank you very much for demonstrating needs to properly consider regional and cultural aspects in all of our works through regional collaboration. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome Mr. John Russel Benavidez, Persons with Disabilities Affairs Office of the City Government of Muntinlupa, the Philippines, and Ms. Miriam del Rosario, Executive Director of the Birthright Educators Foundation, Philippines. Mr. Benavidez is public health nurse by profession and had previously worked in public health office as well as health emergency and disaster management team in the city government of Muntinlupa. Mr. Benavidez is currently leading various inclusive COVID-19 response of the newly established Disability Affairs Office in the city. And Ms. del Rosario has been spearheading wide range of activities, including running schools, a rehabilitation center, and community-based projects for adults and children with disabilities in Muntinlupa City. We are very grateful for your sharing municipal level experiences today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Professor Tsutsumi and Professor Izutsu. Thank you for having us here. So for the grassroots highlights of disability inclusive COVID-19 response, next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. In Muntinlupa City, Philippines, the disability inclusive COVID-19 highlight responses are as follows. First is the community-based identification of persons with disability in need. Second is the relief operations for the affected persons with disabilities. Third is the online mental health and psychosocial support. So next slide, please. For the community-based identification of persons with disability in need, in partnership with the community health workers of our local city health office, the Disability Affairs Office has launched the CBID program, or the community-based identification of persons with disabilities in need for COVID-19. Actually, this was done January 2020, wherein the community quarantine measures have not yet been ordered by the national government. We know that the first step in doing any disability inclusive disaster risk reduction and management planning is to gather data. And we have updated our database through actual and factual interviews among persons with disabilities in the communities. Here are photos, next slide please, of some actual conversations where our health workers met with persons with disabilities in their respective homes. This was before COVID-19, and it was the CBID program was indeed very instrumental in the following months during the COVID-19 response. So you could show them the picture. Next slide, please. Yeah. These are pictures of the CBID program wherein we identified and located our persons with disabilities in the communities. Next slide, please. For the relief operations for the affected persons with disabilities, the COVID-19 pandemic has reached the Philippines and then Muntinlupa City. Enhanced community quarantines were put in place to aggressively slow down the spread of infection. Everyone was told to stay at home. This has posed problems like unemployment and not being able to provide food on the table for some Filipino families, including the persons with disabilities. Abiding by the Department of the Interior and Local Government's Memorandum Circular 2020-066 guidelines and through Mayor Jaime Fresnedi's instructions, we have helped our city government in reaching the persons with disability, receive and be prioritized in accessing basic goods such as food. Our office has also provided our local and community governments with a list of the registered persons with disabilities in the communities where they can be found, so that the distribution of relief goods will be easier, which can be seen on the picture. Could you please show it? Next slide, please. Yeah. So the second picture, next slide, please, is when our team, led by Dr. Caril de Guzman, our department head, personally handed out the food packs to the community. And we have reached to them, asking for their needs and to ensure that no persons with disabilities are left behind in this response. So the third picture, next picture, here depicts the all-hands-in approach of Muntinlupa City in the COVID-19 disaster response. all departments, all employees who are able to help, and even our leaders are actively participating in this labor-intensive task of making sure all citizens, including persons with disabilities, are not going hungry. So for the last bit, next slide, please. For the online mental health and psychosocial support, or what we call the virtual MHPSS, uh, through the alliance of our City Health Office, the Social Services Department, the Disability Affairs Office, and other volunteering government employees and departments, a team of trained MHPSS responders was assembled to respond to the mental health needs of all affected individuals, especially persons with disabilities. We have launched a mental health page in Facebook since it is widely used, the most widely used social platform available in our country. Everyone uses it. That is why we have selected this social networking site. Doing it in this fashion is very accessible and safe from the current COVID-19 infection. Our services are for free. Persons with disabilities can reach out to us, especially those with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities. We conduct free psychological first aid or PFA for those who are heavily affected. We follow the look, listen, and link principle of PFA. The MHPSS team also provides relevant information such as the community quarantine hotlines, available free psychiatric online consultations, and the latest COVID-19 updates. We also do daily posts that inspire and inculcate optimism even during these trying times. Moreover, since the Philippines is a highly religious country, our team has taken advantage of that. And we partnered up with the local churches to do online video prayers, thus instilling hope to our communities. This program is for those who might be vulnerable to further sinking into anxiety and depressive moods, and also act as a safety net or prevention of aggravation of conditions who have mental health conditions. Mental health is as much as important as physical health, and where I'm from, that is a priority. Since March 19, 2020, we have catered to hundreds of clients, which include persons with mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities. Some had difficulty accessing psychiatrists and medications, though they wanted. It had become a challenge during the community quarantine. For an overall description of this online program, we have realized that considering and responding to the mental health of persons with disability during pandemics is a must. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Buboy-san. And I would like to give floor to Ms. Del Rosario.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. I am so happy to be here because now I know that we have people who are really concerned about children and persons with disabilities. And I am the executive director of the Birthright Educators Foundation. And we are on the grassroots. We're dealing with the grassroots. And Birthright is a non-government organization. Do I have the PowerPoint now? Can we have it? Yes. Yeah, we are managing a school, a rehabilitation center, and a community-based inclusive development project for persons and children with disabilities. We started as a small church ministry, which grew into a non-government organization. And now we are supported by Norfields, Tikting Liliani Funds, Alabang Ladies International, and some private individuals who have a burden, who have burdens to help the children with disabilities. And we want to share with you what we are doing Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, next slide. How we responded to the lockdown. At first, of course, we were surprised, no? We were surprised. What are we going to do? We are not allowed, the lockdown prevents us from going from one place to another. But in our school, we had immediate virtual meeting with the parents and students to shift to home study. And through the use of School of Tomorrow paces, we're using School of Tomorrow paces, workbooks for the children. That is for our school. And then the role of teachers changed, of course, from face-to-face supervisors to coaches for parents and children in their homes. The role of parents also changed from mere domestic supporters to home tutors and supervisors of their children's home school. The students' role did not change as learners, as they have been trained to study their workbooks at school. Only the place of learning changed. In our community-based inclusive development workers, they continued to visit children, but with a strict implementation. Next, please. Next. Yeah. Our community-based inclusive development workers visited children, but with a strict implementation of lockdown rules. The role also changed from caseworkers and teachers to cooks and direct helpers of marginalized children. In the Philippines, it's quite difficult because we still have very poor children who have disabilities. And these are marginalized more by this pandemic. Our workers reported to the office the needs of children with disabilities who were affected due to the unemployment of their parents. Next. We had feeding of 70 children in the dump site area in San Pedro, where feeding was done from April 28 to May 29 until the families received their government amelioration funds. Children were also given crayons, toys, and activity books to occupy their time and feed their minds during the lockdown. Next, please. Yeah, that's the feeding program in this informal settlers settlement. Next, please. Yes, we concentrated on providing protein for the bodies of the children. Next, please. Yeah, we also afforded the children, 31 children who had disabilities, the needed nutrition. They were given milk and groceries for soft meals that they needed. Next, please. In our rehabilitation center, due to the fact that our rehab workers are not staying within our grounds, the rehabilitation of children with disabilities were not followed up. But this week, only this week, we had a meeting with our therapist, and now that we are under GCQ, our therapy workers are starting to call the parents of children at home and supervising their home programs. Next, please. What are our realizations? We realize that schools and all public service institutions have to adapt to the new normal, which is the use of virtual environment. We must strengthen our capability to communicate and contact persons with disabilities through strong virtual community platforms. We must also strengthen the capability of persons and children with disabilities to communicate with us their needs by having good virtual infrastructure, by providing them good cell phones and other gadgets which they can use to contact government agencies and NGOs. The most of them are just very quiet because they don't have the capability or the resources to communicate their needs. Next, please. The government and civil society should provide safety nets for people marginalized by the disasters. More people, organizations may be organized so that they can be empowered and communicate their constituents' condition. We have to help persons with disabilities to organize themselves in every barangay so that they can voice out their needs. People organizations know their own needs and they can communicate and ask for this from the government. NGOs and civil society must also think of other safety nets that persons and children with disabilities could fall into when times of disasters and crisis comes. Specific agencies must act specifically for this special group. Safety nets should also be inclusive so that everyone will be involved. And we have to see to it that children could also be heard, that they can also participate on the things that are happening in their environment. We have also to include the children and ask and consult with them. The ancient strategy must be felt by the persons and children with disabilities themselves. Attitudinal barriers that remains the charity point of view must cease. This has to stop. Society must realize that we are duty bearers and they are right holders. These are our recommendations for the government and for civil societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benavidez and Ms. Del Rosario, for sharing your concrete community-based practices in the COVID-19 crisis, as well as shedding lights on importance to include perspectives of children with disabilities. The presentation reminded us in crisis situation, partnerships and coordination beyond sectors are the key, and various stakeholders, for example, as to children, parents, teachers, municipal workers, and so on, play each role as a very important things. And that reminded me of recently published Interagency Standing Committee guidelines on inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action, which are also very useful in working on multi-sector collaboration and coordination. Last but not least, in this segment of country experiences sharing, I would like to welcome Ms. Porsche Poh, co-founder and executive director of Silver Ribbon Singapore. Ms. Poh leads Silver Ribbon Singapore's activities, which aims at promoting positive attitude towards mental health in the community through addressing stigma, promoting inclusion of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities in various aspects of community life through innovative means. They have been very successful in mobilizing support from the government, high-level officials, celebrities, and the public. She is also a board member of the World Federation for Mental Health. Thank you very much, Ms. Poh, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Takashi and Atsuro-san for involving me in this. I am really blessed now to listen to all the sharing by representatives across the country, and everybody emphasized so much on like the strengthen networking and the emphasize on partnership in making a change. So today is my great pleasure to share with you on what we are doing in Singapore. And as you know that mental disorder is also a form of disability. So I'm going to share about the effort in Singapore. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in Singapore, it's reported that we are having a total of 36,405 cases of COVID cases. And the government is working very hard to address all these issues. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to just quickly run through what is going on in Singapore. Knowing that everybody is getting so anxious and facing high level anxiety, what the government is doing is introducing those cone alert levels. That is like every now and then when they announce the situation in Singapore, they will tap on this alert level to tell us that from green is escalate to yellow and to orange, and what we could do and what we shouldn't be doing. So it's good that we are being alert every now and then, and it actually help to address our anxiety, the public anxiety, as well as like persons with disability. Secondly, we have a Prime Minister who made the announcement about circuit breaker. You'll see that everybody talk about lockdown in other parts of the world. But in Singapore, we use a very positive term about on lockdown, that is circuit breaker. And the government set the period for circuit breaker from 7 April to 1st June. And during this period of time, of course, a lot of do's and don'ts, and you've got to be very careful, and you make sure that we stay at home, and we can only get out from our house when we need to purchase grocery, and that's it. So the third step, what the government is doing to allay the anxiety of the general public and persons with disability is debunking fake news. And during this period of time, with a lot of fake news, and everybody will start feeling anxiety and feel with uncertainty. So there's a good effort of the government in debunking fake news. This is a very good step for them. And then following that, I heard a lot of speakers talking about the essential service and non-essential service. Same with Singapore, the government actually classified the different services to curb the spread of the COVID-19. And just now, some of the speakers talk about the need to address the finances of the community or persons with disability. So what the Singapore government did was to offer grant to different individuals with different who are affected by the COVID-19, as well as businesses, including those who are self-employed. And also during this period of time, COVID outbreak, when a lot of people are running out of sanitizer and masks, and everybody have the fear of being infected. So what the government did was to ensure the free distribution of sanitizer to the community, as well as free distribution of reusable masks to the community to allay our anxiety. Next slide, please. And on top of that, this is something really emphasizing so much on mental health and emotional support. That is like the government decided to set up the National Care Helpline to address the emotional issue, and mobilizing up to 300 psychologists and social workers and counselors to come together and make a change and provide support to the community to address mental well-being, violence and abuse. And you see that towards the second part, actually we realized that we have like 6,600 calls by the end of the month after the announcement. And 40% channel to the trained volunteers. And we see that we also direct to the relevant essential service like other countries. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm from Silver Ribbon, which is an NGO to address mental health issues in Singapore. So what my team did was we collaborate different parties and stakeholders. That's what have been repeated by many speakers. Collaboration with the media. So we actually published some articles about mental health issues to raise awareness and to share some tips. And then we collaborated with policymakers. And I remember the speaker from Pakistan actually shared the need to present the issue to the policymaker. So what do? We collaborate with them so that they understand the challenges faced by the ground persons with disability. And it was very well received. Following that, we also collaborated with government agency. And you see that the third slide on the right corner is self-care is not a selfish act. That's like we posted it on Instagram and Facebook to raise awareness on that. It's a collaboration with the government agency. Following that, we also collaborate with our partnering organizations and also the religious group with other churches. And we also work with the retail outlet. There's the shopping mall. There's like we have stickers sticking at the shopping mall about raising awareness on mental health. That's what we did for Silver Ribbon. Next slide, please. And on top of that, we try to understand the challenges faced by persons with mental health issues or emotional issues. So first step, what did we do was like online emotional support. So we provide complimentary online emotional support anybody could dial in, and we will conduct online emotional support using Zoom. And for those elderly who are not IT savvy, we provide phone counseling for them. Following that, we have online mental health events. So my team has worked really, really hard to put up the whole list of online events. And you'll see the catch-up bottle over there, and we name it as catch-up events, online events. And we involve persons with mental health issues to perform or share their personal experience coping with mental health issues during this COVID period. Yeah, so we also provide online mental health workshops to equip organizations, to equip them with basic mental health knowledge so that they are able to provide emotional support to staff with emotional issue or feeling very stressful. And we also conducted an online mental health survey so that we can understand what is happening at the ground. And in fact, we realized that through this survey, 1 in 4 participants actually feeling lonely and experience low mood and anxiety. Next slide, please. So that's what we have been doing for Silver Ribbon. And actually, this is the last slide that I would like to share. Is like, it's very important to work with the media. The power of media is very important if we want to advocate for a change. And never in our life, of myself or all the mental health organizations in Singapore have ever come across this amount of media coverage during this period of time. And it's really good by having more media coverage and more people read about that and understand the importance of mental health. They are more likely to come forward to seek for early treatment during this period of time, which indirectly actually encourage them to move on their life and live a productive life. Thank you so much for your welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Porsche. Thank you for highlighting the importance of mental health and well-being of all people, including all persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 situation, which was also highlighted by colleagues from the Philippines. In addition, many thanks for reminding us that persons with mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities, as well as persons with intellectual disabilities, are often more marginalized and excluded in the society, including in the COVID-19 response. We need to ensure inclusion of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities in all the aspects of COVID-19 response and recovery. Also, both colleagues from the Philippines and Singapore touched upon partnerships with religious groups and religious leaders. And thank you for reminding us of the key aspect which needs more attention. I would like to now move on to the last segment of today's discussion, which is case studies of multi-sector experience in Japan. We will hear about emerging but often neglected priorities from key players in Japan. First, it is my great pleasure to welcome 3 very talented young people representing 3 youth organizations working on leaving no one behind. Ms. Rika Sugata, representative of UNITE, Mr. Satoshi Iyama, co-founder of the Empower Project, and Ms. Kana Yokoyama, representative of the Voices of Youth Japan. They have been actively working with various global and local stakeholders, including UN agencies. For example, they have co-organized events at the Conference of State Parties of the Convention at the UN headquarters, and they have also participated as a panelist in the UN panel discussion at the International Day of Persons with Disabilities events in New York. They are also working closely with other agencies such as UNICEF to provide platform to leave no young people behind. Currently, 1 out of 4 people in this world are young people, and they are the creators of our future. It is my privilege to have these young leaders in the forum today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, organizers, and participants all over the world. My name is Rika Sugata. I am the representative of UNITE, a youth organization at the University of Tokyo. We are engaging in various activities related to the sustainable development goals through arts and culture, in collaboration with the UN agencies and other partners. Today, we would like to share our youth activities on leaving no one behind in this COVID-19 pandemic and building back better toward the post-COVID-19 world.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Satoshi Iyama, co-founder of the EMPA project. I'd like to thank UNITAR and organizers for giving us this wonderful opportunity to represent young people and share our perspectives. My dream is realizing the world where all of us can live in well-being and dignity, regardless of nationality, gender identity, disability, or other differences. In our generation, various individuals share their unique views and experiences through SNS beyond borders. Therefore, differences are perceived as a value rather than a threat. We believe such a generation can play a key role in realizing leaving no one behind through addressing social barriers and stipulated in the CRPD. When we are in difficult situations, such as in the current COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most powerful solutions is supporting each other. When we support each other, diversity becomes strength. What kind of support is useful would not rely on categorization of people based on attributions, but on specific needs of individuals, which always change over time. Stereotypic preconceptions are often incorrect. In most cases, needs cannot be identified without direct communication, whether in person or through online communication. Based on such concept, we founded the EMPA project, which we have been rolling out in Japan and some other countries, sometimes together with UN agencies. This project promotes the Magenta Star Badge to indicate our willingness to support others. We call it Coming Out by Supporters. Through this initiative, each and everyone can be a supporter for those who need support. Of course, there are many persons with disabilities and older persons who wear the Magenta Star Badge. This is transformative because in Japan, we tend to take for granted coming out by those who request support, such as pregnant women, persons with disabilities, and others. But this project promotes the opposite, coming out by supporters. We thought the concept can be useful to promote, especially in this COVID-19 situation, and we have organized media campaigns with celebrities, private sector, and academia to make the concept widely known and support others rather than hate each other. Social, physical, and attitudinal barriers are made by people. Hence, we need people to transform those barriers in mind in society in respect and support, as well as access and inclusion. Through this, I believe we can realize a world where all of us can live in dignity. We, the young generation, believe emotion of each one of us is very important in such processes. In addition to traditional global indicators such as GDP, death toll, and others, we would like to propose to include indicators on our emotion so that we can truly monitor impact of interventions in terms of well-being and dignity. Since everyone is different anyway, mutual support might fill each other's gap. Small support can be big enough, and mutual support must be a key factor for realizing leaving no one behind and the elimination of social barriers. Thank you.
My name is Kana Yokoyama, the representative of Voice of Youth Japan. I would like to thank UNITAR and co-organizer for giving us this great opportunity to exchange ideas and experiences with world leaders. Next slide, please. The Voice of Youth Japan, VOYJ, is an online community for young people to exchange ideas with other youth with various backgrounds, to understand others' viewpoint, and to connect and engage with other youth beyond graphical or other barriers. Next slide, please. The VOYJ is run by VOYJ Management Committee, organized by university students in partnership with UNICEF Tokyo office and the Japan Committee for UNICEF. The VOYJ was launched in 2018 with UNICEF Executive Director Ms. Henrietta Ford. Next slide, please. The VOYJ puts special attention to the voice of marginalized youth, and ensuring accessibility is a priority. so that the platform can mobilize voices from non-traditional youth, including those who are among silent majority and silent minority. So far, WYG has achieved marked success in mobilizing voices of youth from various parts of Japan, namely from 25 prefectures, as well as from various backgrounds, sexual orientation, and other diversities. This has not only promoted communication and partnerships among young people, but also mobilized interest among adults and influencing their decision-making. In the COVID-19 situation, we have issued special articles and voices on how to respond to the pandemic for young people, since most of information from the government and medias are for adults, older persons, or children. We also provide platforms to live communicate with each other in this challenging time, so that those who might feel isolated or left behind can be linked up with other youth. We have not been specifically mentioning with youth with disabilities, since our platform takes diversity for granted, and all our activities pay attention to accessibility for all, including persons with disabilities. There are many leaders, participants, and collaborators with disabilities in our project, but that is natural for us. To conclude our presentation, I would like to highlight several key points. First of all, no matter who we are, where we are from, whether we have any disability, we all are able to cooperate with each other. Our Magenta Star badge encourages all of us to focus on individual needs rather than categories. Then we all are able to respond to those needs and ask for support whenever we need any. In addition, some young people, including myself, tend to hesitate to express our true feelings for fear that our voices could be ignored or would not be accepted. In such cases, young people, including young persons with disabilities, can be marginalized. We hope that our world will become a place where youth can freely express themselves regardless of their disability or many other differences, and where the whole community will listen to voices that may easily disappear, since each voice does matter. Last but not least, our voices might be small though. Making the most of our new and creative ideas, we, the young generation, will surely be able to contribute to achieve a more inclusive society where no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for very inspiring presentations. It is very encouraging to hear young generations naturally perceive differences as strengths rather than threats through their day-to-day life. And it is wonderful to imagine a future world where all people are studying, working, and living together without unnecessary categorization or labeling of each other through such great and youth activities. In addition, recommendations to include indicators on emotional well-being and mechanisms to listen to voices of unheard voices are very profound. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome Mr. Ryo Osera, co-founder of Kabuki Style, as well as Huff, which I assume he will explain in his presentation. Mr. Osera is a social entrepreneur from Nagasaki. And before starting his business, Mr. Osera has a unique experience to have served as an SNS focal point of the Japanese Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's Cabinet Secretariat. Mr. Osera will share his perspective from a social innovator and a co-founder of a private company which promotes new ways of living. Mr. Osera, it is a privilege to have you today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for a great introduction, Professor Izutsu. I am very grateful for letting me participate in such wonderful and memorable opportunities today for myself and my hometown, Nagasaki. And I'm also honored to share my story in this forum with this distinguished participant. So Nagasaki, I will make the next slide, please. Nagasaki, my hometown, has its own unique history even within Japan. In short, it's always had a history of acceptance. Maybe next slide, please. This city was originally built by the Japanese government about 400 years ago as the only place in Japan open for foreign trade. Items, people, and information from across Europe and China arrived in Nagasaki first before spreading across Japan. Western Chinese cultural influences were absorbed into local Japanese culture, and this mix of culture found its way into things like food and festivals. For example, next please, there's a local dish in Nagasaki called Turkish rice. What does Turkey have to do with Nagasaki? Well, it is said that the reason for this is that Turkish rice is made up of a meat cutlet, spaghetti, curry, and fried rice, delicious food from East and West combined on one plate, which is kind of like the trade center of the Europe and Asia, Turkey. However, to be completely honest, no one in Nagasaki knows that the actual reason for its name Sorry. In any case, please be sure to try our local dish and see if you can gain a sense of its origins after coronaviruses, of course. Okay, maybe next slide. Yeah. Back in its heyday, Westernization was more prevalent in Nagasaki than anywhere else in Japan, which is what eventually also led it to become the target for the atomic bomb. Despite that sad day in history, which is about 200,000 people reduced to ashes in an instant, Nagasaki still continues to be a place of acceptance, a fact that is very famous across Japan. Perhaps it was the faith of the many Christians living in Nagasaki that allowed them to overcome this tragedy. It could also be that acceptance is deeply rooted in the hearts of the people of Nagasaki, where values of different cultures have long been accepted, even when those values were temporarily seen as those of the enemy. We could say that the circumstances surrounding Nagasaki City during the COVID-19 are also unique. No residents of Nagasaki City have been infected up to this point. There's no other place in Japan with a population of 400,000 or more that has recorded a zero local infection figure. Another unique thing is that a huge foreign cruise ship that docked in Nagasaki ended up having a large cluster of nearly 150 COVID positive persons. Next slide, please. There was a huge shock for the people of Nagasaki, where there have been no cases up until then. There was a big concern that positive persons might fill up the hospital beds. Fear of infection spreading to the local community also spread. The local were a little bit in a panic, and a wrong move could have seen a protest for the exclusion of these foreign nationals. However, as you can imagine, such a terrible affair didn't occur in Nagasaki, the city of acceptance. As a result, almost all of the foreign patients were discharged safely, and the cruise ship left Nagasaki last week without incident to the Philippines. Words of gratitude from those on board as the ship left the port generated a sense of civic pride here in Nagasaki. In other words, inclusiveness is a word that is very familiar to the city of Nagasaki and a value that comes naturally to us. Through the history of trade, the history of the atomic bombing, and so on, I feel that this ability to accept and value things that are different from ourselves is a force that the world needs now more than ever. We need to embrace diversity, including disability, nationality, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and religion. Now is the time to promote this concept of inclusivity to the world as a Nagasaki inclusive value. The city has the ability to take a leadership role in proposing the inclusion of diverse 21st century values as a Nagasaki inclusive value to the world. Next, please. As a representative of a private company that was built and is headquartered in Nagasaki, I am committed to making these values our civic pride and to run my business in a way that is worthy of being recognized by the world. I started HALF in April of last year. HALF is an acronym for Home Away from Home. We named our service in that hope that it will become a home away from home for all kinds of people right across the world. By signing up to our subscription service, one can stay as much as one wants all over the world. I created this service and launched it from Nagasaki with a dream of a world where you can work and live where you want and with who you want. At present, Members of have access to facility in 163 cities across 20 countries and regions, and this number is growing. Oddly enough, COVID-19 has accelerated the world into an era in which people can work without having to be in the office, with the introduction of remote work in companies right across the globe. If people can make choices according to their own values, even make a decision like, I want to live near beaches, or what location should I call home next, then we can move forward towards a future that is more inclusive of diverse values. We will continue to develop our service so that regardless of any circumstances, people will have more opportunity to choose a home by their own values. Physical accessibility is still one of this city's biggest challenges. First of all, the town is full of steep slopes. Getting from one place to another is a sweaty business for all, including persons with disabilities. Many homes and shops are in locations that are not serviced by public transportation, which place significant limitation on travel. Even in our directly operated HAF facility here in Nagasaki, a refurbished 50-year-old building, there's no elevator, so wheelchair users need support in going upstairs. However, building upon Nagasaki's history of inclusion, we are now reviewing all our facilities and services and promoting accessibility through addressing environmental, institutional, and attitudinal barriers. In the process, we are working together with the various stakeholders, including young people, persons with disabilities, older persons, in order to learn from various perspectives. During the pandemic, wheelchair users have experienced more anxiety than the person without disabilities. Some persons with disabilities have said that they have needed to take more precautions because their faces are close to spots and places touched by the hand of persons without disabilities. Others made mention that it would be nice if there were more wet towels made available to wipe their hands after using their wheelchairs. For people with visual impairments, touch is information, so more support is wanted with helping to keep their hands clean as well. It's quite common to hand out wet wipes for free in Japan, so by informing staff, we are able to put this practice in place immediately. In conclusion, please let me introduce a Japanese famous poem by Misuzu Kaneko called A Bird, a Bell, and Me, with a line that goes, all are different, all are good. All Japanese poets know this poem. The poem reads, no matter how I spread my arms, I cannot fly like a bird. But unlike me, a flying bird cannot run fast on the ground. I cannot make a sound as beautiful as a bell, yet unlike me, a ringing bell does not know many songs. There's yourself, and then there are people different to you, and both are important. This is a message of this 100-year-old poem, whose words, even today, make you think. The value of the word inclusiveness comes from knowing the differences between ourselves and the others, and respecting the goodness of both. We need to know our own values and listen to the values of others. By appreciating both, we can transform diversity into town values. We will strive to carry on the legacy of this town through Nagasaki inclusive value. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation full of attraction of the inclusive city of Nagasaki, as well as our future world where we'd have more options to pursue our dreams. I deeply agree that the inclusive crisis response cannot be achieved without preparing for it in our day-to-day life and nurturing culture of diversity and inclusion as a priority of each local community and each individual. It is true that most of our challenges in the global and local communities are born from day-to-day exclusion, social barriers and gaps, and lack of respect for differences. It was also very inspiring to hear about that very new way of living and working, which will definitely increase options for all of us, including persons with disabilities. And as the last speaker of today's forum, I'm honored to welcome Mr. Yuhei Yamada, Executive Director of Porsche, which is an organization of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities based in UNITAR-Tokyo. He is also a board member of Japan National Group of Mentally Disabled People and a member of TCI-AP. Mr. Yamada leads various activities related to the protection and promotion of the rights of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, including leading the development process of the parallel report for the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, especially on paragraphs related to mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities. He is a father of a 3-year-old boy. He will speak in Japanese and I will interpret. The floor is yours. 山田さんお願いします。
ありがとうございます。私、日本語で話をさせていただきます。精神障害当事者会ポルケの山田裕平と申します。私たちのグループは東京を拠点とし、精神障害の当事者によって運営される障害出版会になります。
Thank you very much. I would like to speak in Japanese. My name is Yuhei Yamada from Poke, which is an organization of and by persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities based in Tokyo.
この間の新型コロナウイルスの影響下において、精神障害の当事者を対象にしたウェブのアンケート調査を4月23日から5月7日にかけて行いました。全国から371件の回答が寄せられました。本日はこちらのキーアウトカムについて関連して話題提供したいと思います。
We conducted an online survey on influence of COVID-19 among persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities from 23rd of April to 7th of May. 371 responses were collected from all over Japan. Today, I would like to share with you some preliminary key outcomes of the survey.
今回の調査ではまず、日本では政府が全国民に10万円を支給することについて、その用途を問いました。その結果、約 40% の精神障害のある人は、収入が減っているため、生活の足しにすると回答しました。一方で、同じく約 40% が貯金もしくは楽しみに使うと回答し、経済的な緊急性のない状態であることも示唆されております。
In Japan, the government decided to provide financial support of 100,000 yen, which is equivalent to $930 to all people living in Japan. In the survey, we asked how each respondent plans to use the money. As a result, while about 40% responded that they will use the money to compensate for the decreased income, and another 40% answered that they will save it in their saving accounts or use it for fun, which indicates that those 40% of respondents are not in financial crisis.
新型コロナウイルスを受けて、オンラインでのコミュニケーションが増え、さまざまな場面でも推奨されてきました。これに関連して、5人に1人の回答者がインターネット通信費などが負担となっていると回答したほか、約 30% 以上の人が、接続やツールの使用をめぐり困難があると回答していました。さらに、音や光に敏感であるため、アクセスが難しい人や対人コミュニケーションの方法として、動画よりも音声、もしくは文字だけのコミュニケーションを望む人の声も聞かれていました。
After the pandemic started, online communication has been recommended and indeed increasing rapidly. Among the respondents with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, 1 out of 5 people answered that they find it difficult to pay internet connection fees for online communication, and about 30% of respondents stated that they face a certain accessibility issues in online communication. Some said they have difficulties in learning how to use those services or tools. Some are sensitive to light and sound, while others mentioned they preferred communication in writing or by audio rather than showing and seeing their faces on a computer or mobile screens.
精神障害のある人の中には、経済的な理由もあり、インターネットの通信環境に恵まれている人ばかりではありません。水や電気と同じように、インターネットは今の時代においては、生活を送る上でもなくてはならない社会的なインフラです。
This indicates that a certain number of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities in Japan have access issues due to various reasons, including financial burdens. In this era, the right to access internet should be properly protected, just like access to basic infrastructures such as water and electricity.
この間にオンラインでの精神障害のある人の当事者の集いが徐々に広がりを見せつつあります。例えばそういった場に参加できない当事者がいると思うと胸が苦しくなります。
In relation to that, there have been an increasing number of online group activities and communication among persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities. It is heartbreaking to imagine some of us cannot participate due to those social factors.
医療サービスの分野においてもオンライン診察の導入が進められており、日本でも開始されたところです。本調査の回答者の多くはオンラインサービスを未経験でした。回答者にオンライン診察を受けたいかどうか尋ねたところ、約半分が受けたいと答えたのに対し、一方で残りの約半分は受けたくないとも回答していました。両方の立場が見られたことも興味深く思っています。
In the health service sector, online consultations had started to be widely introduced in Japan during the pandemic. The outcome of the survey showed very limited number of respondents have experienced such services yet. We asked whether they want to utilize those online consultations, and then very interestingly, about half answered they want to try, and the other half answered they don't want to try. They don't want to use those online consultation services.
すなわち半分がフェイス2フェイスの対面型を希望しているわけですが、対面型の診察について日本では新型コロナウイルスの影響が出る前の平均診察時間について、3分以内が約 16%、10分以内が 55% という結果も出ています。
This means half of the respondents wish to continue face-to-face consultation at hospitals or clinics. Average consultation time in psychiatric setting in Japan is short, and 16% of consultations were less than 3 minutes, and 55% were less than 10 minutes, according to a survey before the COVID-19 pandemic.
このような対面型の診察時間については、新型コロナウイルスの蔓延後、約 60% の回答者が時間が短くなったとも回答しました。
Regarding these face-to-face consultation in psychiatry, after the COVID-19 pandemic started, 60% of the respondents reported decreased time spent in consultation in a survey.
オンライン診察普及に関連して、精神障害のある人へのデバイスの支給や、そしてそれを学ぶ機会、また精神障害をめぐるアクセシビリティを確保することは、社会保障の観点からも重要と伝えていきたいです。
In any case, for those who want to access such online consultations, it is very important to ensure access to digital devices as well as opportunity to learn how to use them for persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities as part of social protection measures.
これらの要因についてはまだ深く考察できていませんが、精神障害のある人を意識したサービスの必要性と精神障害のある人への多様性が示唆されたというふうにも思っております。
Although these outcomes are preliminary and require more detailed analysis, the outcome indicates necessity to increase services which are sensitive to the needs of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, as well as need to attend to diverse preferences, needs, and situations of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities.
国内の統計調査では、障害有無を問わず、去年の3月比 9% 自殺をした人の数はむしろ減っているというニュースがありました。これは過去の戦争や地震の時に自殺をする人が一時的に減る現象と重なるところがあると思っております。
According to a study in Japan, number of suicide deaths among persons with and without disabilities has decreased by 9% compared to last year. This is consistent with the phenomena observed in the past through research on wars and natural disasters, including earthquakes.
このように診察時間の減少については、一時的にせよ、精神的なクライシスがむしろ減っているという仮説を考えています。一方で、これまでのように危機的状況が解けてくると、自殺者の数が急増することも懸念されます。これを念頭に準備をしていく必要があります。
Probably the decrease of time at the psychiatric consultation setting among respondents might reflect the decrease of mental crisis. However, just like what we have learned from the past, the number of suicide might increase after the emergency phase has passed. We need to prepare for such a possibility.
国内における新型コロナウイルスについての感染リスクは徐々に減っている状況にあります。この状況にこそメンタルヘルスの悪化が進む可能性があることを懸念し、精神障害のある人の生活を守り、教育、保健、雇用、地域生活へのアクセスを確保し、偏見やスティグマが増えないようにする必要があります。すなわち、緊急時も含めて、精神障害のある人へのインクルージョンを忘れないようにすることが大切なのであり、精神障害の当事者活動をしている私たちがさまざまな意思決定に建設的に関わることが重要であると考えています。
Risk of infection to the COVID-19 in Japan seems to be decreasing. However, at whatever stages of crisis, it is necessary to prepare for a possible mental health deterioration, to protect lives of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, to ensure access to education, health, employment, and community life, and to address prejudice and stigma. In short, it is important not to forget the inclusion of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities always. For that, it is necessary to engage persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities in various decision-making opportunities in a constructive manner.
最後に、この機会を作ってくださったユニタール、またIzutsuさんをはじめとした関係者に感謝を申し上げたいと思います。国際的なコミュニケーションにおいては、英語でのコミュニケーションが求められがちな状況がありますが、日本語でのスピーチを歓迎してくれたことを大変嬉しく思っています。得てして、英語スピーカーのみが意思決定を行うと、偏りが生じる可能性を感じてきたこともありましたので、素晴らしいアレンジに感謝をしたいと思います。これを機会に、今日つながりを共にした皆さんと、今後もですね、つながりを深めていきたいと思っております。SDGs が歌う誰一人取り残さない社会のために向けて、障害者団体としてできることを頑張っていきたいと思っております。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Lastly, I would like to thank UNITAR and co-organizers for this opportunity. In particular, I am very happy that they allowed me to speak in Japanese while in most of global settings, English is required. Since I had a bit of concern regarding decision-making by only English speakers sometimes, I am extremely thankful for the generous arrangement. Building upon today's forum, I would like to expand and deepen our collaboration. I would like to further commit myself to do my best to realize a world where no one is left behind as envisioned in SDGs. Thank you very much for your kind attention. ありがとうございます、山田さん. And thank you very much for sharing the outcome of your very important and interesting survey, which must be really precious information globally. As Mr. Yamada mentioned, we need to renew our commitment and realize protection and promotion of the rights of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities with catching up with the technological and other advancement and through including them in consultations and decision making. Now we are at the end of the session. We are very much running out of time. So I would like to conclude this meeting with citing from the conclusion of the Secretary General's policy brief. I quote, "A disability-inclusive COVID-19 response and recovery will better serve everyone. It will provide more inclusive, accessible, and agile systems capable of responding to complex situations, reaching the farthest behind first. It will pave the way for better future for all, unquote. Thank you very much for your participation today, and thank you very much for all the distinguished panelists and participation. And we are looking forward to seeing you again in next event. And we are also looking forward to collaborate in our collective efforts to realize inclusive world. Thank you very much and have a good one. Thank you.
Takashi, thank you very much for your great coordination and the moderation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Izutsu and Dr. Tsutsumi.
Thank you very much. Bye.